Hi everyone, I hope you're having a good day today and a good week. Please say hello if you're here live. I'm going to do a quick check like I usually do, just make sure that I'm actually live in the group. So just hang out for a second if you're here. And okay, it looks like I'm good. And let me just okay, cool. Great. Hi, everyone. I just saw someone joined. Please say hello because I can't see who it is, unfortunately. And I do have multiple devices so I can see comments because I couldn't see the comments on the phone previously. So welcome. Today I want to talk about feelings. Big surprise. I wanted to share a little bit more about this phrase that I think is super popular in the healing world, and I 100% believe in it, but I think sometimes it can be difficult to understand what it actually looks like in practice. And so it's, you have to feel it to heal it. And when you are working with big emotions and you're being asked to feel, it can be the thought of it can actually even be very overwhelming. So I want to break down what that can look like to do in practice in smaller steps so that you can actually get to what that actually means on the other side. So a lot of times we are sitting in a lot of energy of confusion, or a lot of energy or feelings that are not 100% ours. And because this group has a lot of sensitives and some empathic people, these are two different things, but some people can be both, some people can be one or the other. But because you're here, I know that is like sort of part of your makeup. And there's lots of ways that if you are a deep feeler, or you have this capacity to pick up on a lot from your environment, and you've had that as a kid, you might have unconsciously shut a lot of that down because feeling everything around you is really just not sustainable, right? It's a little bit too difficult to move through the world, go to the grocery store, go outside, go to work, get on a subway, whatever you're doing, when you're like feeling and picking up on a lot of things from your environment. So by default, I find that the women I work with are sensitive. Hey, Chelsea. Say hello if you have any questions, let me know. What I find with the women I typically work with is because they like have this depth and sort of this capacity to feel, and they've always had it, and maybe they've known they've always had it, or sometimes we don't actually know until later, until we're adults, and when we start to really like learn more about being sensitive, or realize that, oh, I thought everybody could pick up on stuff, or I thought everybody could sort of feel what other people were feeling. Really, that's not true. And again, I've said this before, I think we all have these capacities. I just think that for whatever reason, people are at different levels of development or awareness or consciousness around them. So, it doesn't make it good or bad or right or wrong. It's just that if you have it and you find it overwhelming, then it's probably going to be difficult to do other things in your life, or take action in other places in your life, or just like have clear thoughts in other places in your life, because you're kind of filtering for a lot that's going on. And so, hey Vasna, nice to see you. I'm talking about working with big feelings or big emotions, and how to take some like smaller practical steps to do that. So if you resonate with this, whether you're watching live or on the replay, I'd love to know if you have always known that you're sensitive, or maybe that's something that you're sort of discovering now and you're realizing that maybe you have to do things a little bit differently. I think it's just super helpful helpful for me to know who I'm talking to, so I can give you like more personalized feedback. All right, I'm just refreshing these comments just to make sure. Okay. So again, and as I was saying, like if you have maybe shut all of these sort of abilities to feel down, or just like dimmed them down, you know, they don't have to be shut down, but if they're a little bit dimmed down, then all of a sudden, like, you might have a backlog of just a lot of stuff from, you know, your own life, your childhood, growing up, you know, our whole lives, plus other people's stuff, right? So one of the things that when I work with clients, I talk about, like, probably ad nauseum, is what is your daily practice, right? And people do different things. Like, some people have different clearing practices, some people have spiritual practices, some people have, you know, just more like meditation, sort of the science-based meditation. It doesn't really matter what it is, in my opinion, because the point of this sort of, it's not really steps, because healing is not linear. However, I'm just gonna sort of say, like, first level, next level, next level, because I think it's helpful to have, like, some sort of context, you know. And so if you have some sort of daily practice, let me know. I'd love to know what it is. For me, personally, it's a yoga practice and a meditation practice. I meditate, like, pretty early in the morning as soon as I get up, or sometimes I drag myself up because I want to do it at a certain time, or like around a certain time. And then I do yoga a little bit later. And I've been a yoga practitioner, meditation practitioner for like over 20 years. So this is not like something I just started and I'm like, you know, it's really hard for me. Like, I've done this before. And so not that it takes 20 years to build up a practice at all, or consistency, but I'm just saying that, you know, you might hear people say, like, I do this in the morning, or I do this. And we just don't know how long they've been doing it. So if you are newer to this world and you're just starting, great. Like, it doesn't, you know, that's great. So I say that just to say, you know, don't be sort of influenced in a way by what other people are saying, or it's like, oh, I'm never going to get there. It doesn't necessarily take that long. What it takes is level of just being committed to being consistent, right? So if for 10 minutes a day you have some sort of meditation practice or writing practice, or you listen to an app or guided practice, or you watch a yoga class online, or you know, everyone's on Zoom right now, so maybe you're doing a yoga class on Zoom or whatever. I'm using those things because that's what's familiar to me. It can be anything for you. Qigong, taking a walk in your neighborhood, going to a park, sitting next to a tree, whatever, it doesn't matter. But what I'm inviting you to do is create something that's consistent, because it gives your body this message, like, oh, this is our time to just kind of do this thing right now. And when we are maybe overwhelmed by a lot of feelings, and we are maybe living in a bit of confusion energy, we might not feel super grounded, right? So this kind of regular daily practice, I think it's helpful if it's some kind of body-based connection. I mean, meditation isn't always that way, obviously, unless it's like a walking meditation. But I think it can be helpful to like move your body. It's just a way to kind of every day, if you can do it around the same time every day, I think that's really great, because it just allows our bodies to get into a rhythm, which I think can be really, really helpful for other things, to stay consistent and disciplined with other things. And this is different than being rigid, and I'm going to be really clear about that, because this is not about like, I must do this at this time, otherwise I'm doing it wrong. Our bodies respond to consistency, or structure, I should say. And so I think that can just be really helpful when you have a sensitive nervous system, to do something that's consistent, because it kind of helps your nervous system regulate, you know. And whether that's, like I said, any of these practices, it's just sort of like remind your nervous system, like, oh, we're doing this right now, great, let me just work to create this container. And so we create a little bit of stability along the way. So I'm spending a little extra time on this, because I just think that some people, sometimes we can skip this, or sometimes we can think, oh, it's not such a big deal, but it's really like a great way to create a container for deeper healing. So if you've been struggling with, you know, a lot of stuff from other people, the media, everything that's, I mean, I have no shortage of things that could potentially be triggering us right at this moment. past experiences with other people that maybe you've been wanting to let go of, but you just like can't figure out how to let go of, that they like hang out in your system somewhere. Creating this kind of practice, this daily practice, can just really help your nervous system have some structure and know that this is a time for it to unwind. And so as it unwinds, it just, it's like you're creating more space in your body for energy to move and flow, right? Right now, it might be constricted or a little bit restricted, or even if your tendency that you might have adopted early on to close down your feelings or kind of numb out a little bit or dim down your ability to take things in as a form of protection, which is totally makes sense, is kicked on right now. It's like, oh, your body can be like, oh my gosh, for these 10 or 15 minutes I get to just like relax my body. And yeah, it's not necessarily going to happen the first time you do it or the first 10 times you do it, but if you keep doing it, you'll get there. So let me know if you have any questions about that. I hope that that's helpful. Just and I'm not saying anything that's like rocket science, right? You've probably heard these things before, but I think what is important with that is that it's something that you consider, like, what can I really do realistically every day, and what can I decide to commit to? You know, that's what you need to ask yourself to see if this is, you know, to see whatever path is right for you. And I don't know what that is for you necessarily. When I work with clients individually, we talk that through, and we're like, well, what has worked for you before? What hasn't worked for you before? Maybe why hasn't it worked for you before? And like, let's try some things so that you can really get yourself into like a good space with that. So, and I'm looking to the side a little bit because I do write some notes down because I don't want to totally just be super random, a little organized. So if I'm looking away, it's just because I'm checking my notes. So the more time you spend doing that, creating that container, you'll just naturally create more space. You know, like that energy of confusion will start to shift a little bit, and you'll be able to really notice, like, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's going on with me in this moment? And that's something that if you're kind of walking through your day and maybe getting through it or getting by or not really trying to notice what you're thinking, you might not actually notice all the different feelings in your head. When I did the Reclaim Your Energy challenge a couple of weeks ago, I remember that was some of the commentary of, you know, when people got quiet and set a timer for maybe 5 minutes, and I invited them to notice, like, well, what's really happening in your mind? Some of the things made sense, but some of the things were interesting, like, oh, I didn't realize that was taking up so much of my mental energy. You know, so this creating of this container initially really allows that space to happen so that you can start to notice, like, where is my energy and attention going? Where's my mind going? How am I speaking to myself? These are all like conscious thoughts, right? And when I work with people, we get into the subconscious, like once they get into this space where they can really understand or see the conscious things that are happening, because that takes awareness too, right? So yeah, I just want to check in with what I said. Yeah, so you can even notice, like, how often am I like distracted from my whatever it is that I'm doing, like, and what is it that's taking away my attention? You know, right now so many people are on their phones, so it's like, what am I maybe going to my phone for, or what am I maybe checking my email for, or if I'm like trying to focus on doing this thing for myself or my work or my family or whatever it is, and you notice you're not really present, start to notice, like, well, where's my attention going? Is it going to a particular person? Is it like kind of cycling around a situation or a conversation? Is that currently happening? Is that in the past? How many years ago in the past is it? Like, is stuff still circling around in your mind that happened 10, 20, 30 years ago? Not uncommon, right? Like, we're human beings. If we haven't like really processed something that, in my worldview, like our soul is really asking us to have processed, it's gonna come back up in some way or another, for us to get the message before we can kind of release it and let it go. So this time, like once you've created this, spent a little time creating this container, then you've created this space to like really start to understand like what is happening in my mind, like where is my mental energy going. And I'll just say that, you know, sometimes people are like, I just don't have time, like I don't know when I would fit that in. Once you start to notice how much of your energy is kind of being dispersed by these other things, and how much of your energy is being taken away by stuff that's happened like 15 or 20 years ago, trust me, the 10 minutes that you spend in the morning or at night or whenever it is gonna feel like nothing, you know? Like we actually can create more space and time by doing this. There's a little bit of a I'm like envisioning like a hill, right? Sometimes it can feel like we're going uphill in that process initially before we start to find a bit of ease in it. So yeah, in the beginning, if you've never really done it or you haven't created that time or committed that time and like pushed other things aside to get it done, it's gonna feel like maybe an uphill battle. The other thing I wanted to say about that is like if your energy is actually quite dispersed in general, meaning your attention is often outside of yourself than with yourself, like maybe scanning your environment, checking in to see how other people are doing often. This is often something that happens with people who are sensitive, like you might be checking your environment to be like, how's this person feeling? Because you know, maybe not consciously, but how they're feeling is going to affect how you're feeling. So it's sort of like another protection mechanism that comes up of like, let me make sure everyone else is okay, because then you don't have to feel all the stuff they're feeling, you know. But really, when you're doing that, like you're also just dispersing your energy. So there's no like really building up like a core fire or foundation within yourself. So if you notice that your energy is like dispersed quite easily, this can also feel, again, like a little bit of an uphill battle in the beginning, because you kind of have to gather some energy back in order to use for fuel, right? To have this sort of consistent practice. So you build your practice, you start to really notice like, oh my gosh, like this is where my energy's going. I'm still thinking about X, Y, Z. I didn't realize that was taking up so much of my attention. What do I do with this, right? And so I'm going to share some things that you can do. And before I go there, I just want to share with you like how I work with people when I'm working with them one-on-one, because I think that, you know, we can do much, we can build this foundation on our own. And depending on where you are in your own healing journey, you know, you might be able to really dive into those feelings and go into them yourself and really find those origin pieces. If you're like most people, probably need a little bit of help. And so I just wanted to share with you, when I work with people, we work in a container of 6 months. Like I've worked with people just when I first started, like one session at a time, because that's kind of like what I wanted to do and that's what they needed. And then we've moved into like 1 month sessions where we're like, okay, let's dive in a little bit deeper, and then 3 month. And now I've been offering 6 months. And I think that's super important because a couple of things. One, it can be like, oh my God, 6 months is a long time. But if you think about, we're in August and 6 months ago was February, right? It's felt like probably a couple of years for most of us, right? But 6 months, like so much, right, can happen in 6 months. So even though it can feel like, oh my gosh, that's a long time, it can also, in an interesting way, signal to our bodies like, oh, we actually have this time to do this work, and I don't have to like figure out all the things that are maybe blocking me, or whatever your language is for that, in like a month, or in like 3 sessions, or in 2 months, or anything like that. It's like, oh my gosh, like it actually gives our nervous systems this signal of like, we've got time and we've got someone to help us. This is so great. And so what I've been finding with that is that people are able to like relax more into the process because they don't feel like they're rushing. And so when we meet, like the way I've invited you to think about, like, what are some ways that you build these containers for yourself? What helps your nervous system? We really take people through a process of like, let's understand what practices will help your nervous system, what is going to create that container, what is going to help support you in doing that. And then one of the key things that we do as people are like really starting to get conscious of their thoughts and noticing how their thoughts are impacting them and where their energy is going, is I take them through a guided process to really help them connect what their current triggers are. If you're you're walking around, you have a reaction, someone says something, you have a reaction, you watch something on TV. These are all indications for us of like something in our system that like wants attention. And I have found often, for myself included, that we have a lot of assumptions about what those things are. We might think like, oh, this thing happened to me, back in high school, and that's why I'm acting this way, or that's what this is about. And sure, that might be another layer to it. But what's interesting is when we go through this process, and I really invite people to like drop into their bodies and really feel into what's happening. It can sound like a little bit like, what is that? How does that work? What does that look like? But it's really this process of asking your body for information, because our body really holds the answers once we sort of understand how to communicate with our bodies, right? If we don't know how to communicate with our bodies, and our bodies are signaling like a lot of fear signals or a lot of anxious kind of reactions, then we are like, well, why would I really trust my body? Because it feels like it's a little bit on the fritz, like I don't really know what it's saying. And so that's why the nervous system piece and like getting grounded is so important, because then we start to calm that down so that we can really see like, oh, okay, this is how my body communicates with me. So now I can start to trust some of the responses instead of just thinking, oh, that's just fear, or being so confused that we're like not even really sure what our body's telling us. So when we go through these different processes and we get to like what really is more of the origin story or the trigger of these things, we get to unlock that energy that's been bound in that experience. And then it's liberated, right? It's not stuck in there, or some of it's liberated. I mean, I am never one to say like, you just do this one thing and like magically like your life changes. I think healing is definitely not linear, and it's like a spiralic kind of experience. We revisit things that we visited in the past again, but I really believe that it's like a different layer of healing. And so we can get closer to like what is the truth when we can drop in and have that communication with our bodies to understand that. And we get to unlock that energy. So when you have this more freed up energy, that can take some time to integrate, right? So sometimes it's like you might think, oh great, now my energy's freer. Or maybe you've had like healing sessions with energy healers. I've had really beautiful experiences. Like I've done body work, offered it certainly in the past, and you can see people get relaxed and receive messages and really like drop into their bodies, and it's really beautiful. And sometimes that can be hard to sustain when it's just kind of like a one-off or like random appointment, because our energy shifts and we go back into the same environment, and so we kind of don't know how to integrate that and like really fully hold that and embody that. So that's why like that daily consistent practice becomes so much more important, because it's like we get this opportunity to like integrate the energy. And then when I'm working with people, we get to really do that together, because we've got this freed up energy that maybe doesn't really know exactly what to do yet, because you haven't had it freed up before. And so we want to direct it towards maybe a different way of communicating, or a different way of like holding yourself, or really like recognizing your value or your worth. This happens so often with people in our work together, because they've just been giving so much of their energy away, and they've really equated their value with like what they do for other people. And once they stop kind of overdoing for other people, they're like a little bit lost of like, well then what is what's my purpose? If you really gain purpose from that, and you shift it, you can feel a little bit lost of like, well, how am I going to be helpful to people? It's like, well, you can be helpful to people by first, really being helpful to yourself, and knowing that your time is valuable, and that your energy is valuable, and that your presence is valuable. So that is a tangent, and I could go down it for a long time, but I'm going to come back to here, and I can talk about that another time if you guys are interested. And so that's the sort of that final process of working together of like, how can we help you to really embody this energy? How can we really help you to hold on to it so that you are using it in a different way, and using it in a way that's working for you? And so I do offer support in between sessions, because I think so much happens in that time. We're still living our lives, and so if you have to wait until the next time, sometimes that can just feel like too far away or something. A little shift in between can be so incredibly helpful, just to kind of keep the momentum of the shift that perhaps we've made in a longer session. And so this is what allows people to really integrate and embody these changes in a way that's sustainable. And so for you, if you are, maybe I described sort of those first two things, and you're like, yep, I've been doing that. I have a daily practice, and I know like what all these conscious thoughts are. I know where my energy is going, but I'm still having a hard time. Then the work that you can do on your own, or if you want support, you can reach out and let me know, and I can share a little bit more. Then it's like, okay, can I sit with my feelings? Like, not after you've created the consistent container and notice like where everything's going, what are you avoiding, right, is probably the next best question to ask. Because if you are noticing where, if your mind is like this, or if it's just constantly going out, like, well, what are you avoiding feeling inside? And so if you're a journaler, or if you want to become one, that might be a really great question to ask yourself. If you notice that you have different coping mechanisms that take your attention outside of yourself constantly, the question you can ask yourself is like, what am I avoiding feeling within myself? And so you can write about it, which is great. It helps to shift the energy of it and move it a little bit and bring it more to awareness. And then you can start to really kind of sit with that uncomfortable sensation in your body. Say you're like, well, I'm really afraid of XYZ happening. Can you sit with that thought and sit with the discomfort that it brings up in your body? Sometimes we can sit with something and realize that it will take us to a place that's uncomfortable, but then we'll notice kind of that bell curve going up, and it'll feel super uncomfortable at the top, and then we'll be able to notice the shift of when it starts to come down. Some of you may have practiced yin yoga with me. I've been teaching it for a long time. I've done some online classes as well, and so this is to me very much of like, if you've ever done yin yoga in general, like you're holding poses for about 3 to 5 minutes, so it can get uncomfortable depending on the pose, right? So in the beginning you might be like, okay, this is no big deal, and then you sit with it and the intensity goes up and up and up, and you probably want to get out of it depending on the pose. But if you can sit with that and stay with it for just a little bit longer, often what happens is we get to this top, and then we can feel something open up or shift, and that's your energy shifting in some way. And so that's the practice that you can kind of start to do on your own if you feel comfortable to do that. Again, if you have a history of a lot of trauma or abuse or different things, like if you're in that area or that category, I mean, it's not really a category, but if that has been your experience, then you might need to work with somebody in person, like a therapist, and like really work with that. That might not be something that you can just sit in your living room and do by yourself, depending on where you are, right? And if you have maybe done a lot of work on different difficulties or challenging experiences or trauma, and you're like, I've talked through it, I understand it, sure, it's still upsetting on some level, but you're not in like an acute stage, you might be able to just gently play with this a little bit. Can I sit with some of that discomfort? And for many people, it's who've had different experiences, but maybe they are different levels of trauma, or we perceive them as different levels of trauma. This will feel scarier, or it'll feel less scary. So this is like up to you, your decision of how far you want to dive into this, and explore this on your own. But I offer you just initially that journaling exercise, like what am I avoiding feeling that's inside of me, and just see what comes up. And maybe you sit for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes with something that's coming up that feels uncomfortable, and you can watch and feel the emotion, and what it does. Like, does it sort of have that crescendo at the top, and does it shift into something different? And again, like, the integration of that is so important, because we can shift and move energy, and now it's like a little freer. But if we don't really know how to direct it, or don't really know what to do with that necessarily, then it's easy to kind of just sort of fall back into that same pattern, because we will gravitate towards what's familiar, even if it's like not working for us. Like, we'll kind of just keep doing things that are familiar because they're known and they feel safer, which is why change can be really challenging, right? Because we're like really breaking through the energy of familiarity. And so we circle back to that first point of the consistency, the consistent practice. That's why building up that fire and that consistency and that discipline, not rigidity, but discipline, is so important, because then we are like building up our own fuel, right? To kind of keep us going on the path, even when those things get difficult. We kind of build up our trust in ourselves to be able to like handle life. And that's really ultimately, I think, what many people want. I don't think it's particularly realistic to think that nothing difficult is ever going to happen to us. We are collectively going through a very difficult time, and everyone's having different experiences with that. And so that is the nature of life and learning and experiences. But when we can build up that strength and steadiness within ourselves to trust that we can handle that, that's like really where the gold is, and part of that is processing what is keeping us stuck, or what's holding us back, or processing the things that are taking up so much of our bandwidth or energy, from the past or current situations. If you're feeling like emotionally entangled with something in your life, like freeing that up allows you to direct your energy towards, creating the life that you want, and directing your attention to the places that are important to you, that align with your values. So again, I'm not going to talk in steps, because I don't think healing's linear, but for lack of sort of a better structure, building that consistent practice, whatever it is for you, meditations, guided practices, walks, yoga, qigong. Second, really start to pay attention to your inner world, your conscious thoughts, where your energy is going. Number 3, once you get to a place where you can do this, sit with your uncomfortable feelings and notice where they are in your body, maybe how you can shift them, how you can free some of that stuck energy. If you want support with this, please reach out. You can send me a message and just let me know that you watched this video. Let me know what resonated for you, and let me know that you are, looking for some help. And I can share with you a little more detail about how I do that. This is work that I love to do. I love watching women really step into their own seat of power. I think that can sound a little bit cliche sometimes, but it's really what I see happen, because of their sort of sensitive or empathic nature. They've given so much away and disperse so much of their energy that it can take, just that bit of time to like really reclaim it back. And so the program that I offer people, it's a one-on-one program, is called Reclaim Yourself, and that is for that very exact reason. Because so many of the women I work with have like over time given their time, energy, and attention away, all with good intentions, and caring intentions, but not really serving themselves, and ultimately not really serving their larger vision of life. So thanks for being here. If you watch the replay, just put in #replay. If you have any thoughts or questions, leave them in the comments. If you are interested in receiving support around this, you can send me a message and reach out. And I will be with you guys soon. All right, bye.